لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين والمظلومين ولعن الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في محكم الكتاب المجيد: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين بالقسط شهداء لله لو على أنفسكم أو الوالدين أو الأقربين إن يكن غنيا أو فقيرا إن الله أولى بهما. صدق الله العلي العظيم. وصل على محمد وآله طيبين الطاهرين. Tonight's topic, I wish to continue slightly, or rather to continue from yesterday to a certain extent, to talk about what is it that the Imams expect from us. But within that context, I want to discuss justice, fair play, and fairness in general. And what does the Quran have to say about this? What does Allah's book have to say about this? And how has this been manifested and expressed in the words of our first Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi afdal as-salatu was-salam? And in understanding these principles, the principles of justice, the principles of fair play, the principles of truth, from that we can develop an understanding of the Husseini mission. Right? Remember last night, there was a reason why I went to Sayyidah Zahra and turned back to her mother. From Sayyidah Zainab to Sayyidah Zahra. There's a reason. I wasn't just doing that to make things more complicated. I want to demonstrate how these children were the splitting image of their parents. But here I'm not talking about in physical terms. I'm talking in their speech, in their akhlaq, in the way that they operated, in the things that they said. And in doing so, we understand that the effect, or rather we're able to derive from that the effect of Sayyidah Zahra and Imam Ali, and the effect that that household had, and the environment that they created within that household as almost like a preparatory moments for the day of Ashura. It's all a preparation of values and morals and ethics which would be manifested on the day of Ashura and the things that happen after Ashura. But I'm not going to focus on Ashura today. I'm going to go back to Ali ibn Abi Talib. But I'm not only going to focus on history, because at times history can be a little dry. So I'm going to turn into modern issues. But the verse that I began with really encapsulates everything that I'm speaking about justice, and what the Imams spoke out against, and what they supported, and what they stood for. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah An-Nisa 135, O you who believe, be standard bearers for fair play and justice. Kunu qawamin bil qist. I'm just going to briefly explain what this means. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not saying, say that you are just. Speak about justice. Have lectures on justice. But be just. The Quran is not interested in our pleasantries, in our expressions, in our words, shall I say. But God is asking us to become something. He's saying, become a standard bearer of justice. Don't talk about it. Don't fascinate about it. Don't just sit in a circle and wish I was something. But become something. And if we don't become anything, then this book of God in our life has no use. It has very little use then. Because Allah is saying kunu. He's not saying kulu. He's not saying say. He's saying be just, become something. We have to manifest this fairness in our life. And then what does God say? He says, shuhada lillah ala anfusihim. Ala anfusikum, rather, on yourself. That first and foremost, we must be just with ourselves. What does this mean? Meaning I have to be able to look myself in the mirror and first admit the weaknesses I have to myself. That if there's a certain sin I'm committing, if I'm not waking up for salat, if I'm constantly rude, if I'm constantly have a sense of arrogance to my brother or sister who perhaps is in a lesser state of education or whatever it may be, there are all these satanic whispers. First, we have to be straight with God. We have to be able to look in the mirror and say, these are my faults. And even if it means I have to blame myself for something, I first look within myself before going outside. Before blaming the community, the alim, my elders, my youngers, I first look in my own soul. And I ask myself, what have I done to improve myself spiritually before I begin to point the fingers outside? This is very, 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 very important. It starts at the self. We cannot build a community or communities without building ourselves. We can't expect the mosque to do the job. We can build institutions. We can bring in resident scholars. We can bring in ayatollahs who relate to the youth, who speak English, everything that we want. But if I am not ready to work on myself, or to make the commitment to attend something, to make the commitment to improve myself, then what's the use? At the end of the day, we can't blame institutions then. We have to start with justice and being fair with ourselves before we wish to deflect problems towards others. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. O al-walidain, or your parents. No one, our parents, this is quite profound because we understand that obedience to the parents after God and the Ma'asum is the most important. We know that. God says you can't even say to your parents. You can't even frown. In fact, there's some traditions of the Imams that if your father or mother was to spank you, for example, you should pray to Allah for their forgiveness, even if they are wrong. Not to say that what they did was right, but you pray to Allah to forgive them. But in this case, God is saying that we have to be ready to witness against our own parents. That when it comes to haqq, when it comes to the issue of truth and untruth, no one gets a free ride. No one in this universe gets a free ride. Let me give you an example. Just to put all this in perspective here. Practical examples are important. There was an individual who asked for a hand in marriage of a Muslim sister. Let us say, for example. The father accepts, the person is a mu'min, he's a good brother, has all the right attributes. She wishes to be with him, he wishes to be with her. They are both God-fearing. He has found a way to support her, because that's important. But he is a convert. he's a white Canadian or American or whatever, Australian, doesn't matter. He's just not of the same color. He's not a part of the country club for some. And he applies, or rather comes to the father to ask for her hand in marriage. The girl accepts. Father begins to create excuses. Well, the eldest daughter should really get married first, so we'll see 3-4 years down the road, maybe. Come back. Now, first of all, that premise is a batil premise. The Sunnah there's no such thing as eldest daughter has to get married. This is complete bid'ah, nonsense, dhulm, to reject a proposal based on this idea. Secondly, to reject a proposal based on the skin color or ethnicity of the one that is proposing is dhulm. It's racism and it's dhulm, because our imams themselves married people of all kinds of colors. So it's like slapping the imam, basically. It's like insulting the imam. So our imams themselves married people of all kinds of ethnicities. We know this. Africans, Romans, Persians, we know this. We hear this from the member, we know these things. This is a case in which the child would have to say that, Dad, you're wrong. Dad doesn't get a free pass here. It's not okay. You can't stay silent because it's dhulm. It's wrong. It's injustice. So thus, awal walidain, or the parents, awal aqrabin, those that are close, your relatives, nor do they get a free pass. This is what Allah is asking from us. There's no such thing as long as I'm in my club, I'm protected. No such thing. God is saying justice has to be applied at every level, in every aspect of society, in every aspect of our relationships. No one gets a free pass. Not when it comes to the issues of haqq and batil. In yakun ghaniyan or faqira. Whether he is rich or poor, it doesn't matter. This is the ayah of the Quran. Inna Allah awla bihama. For God comes before the rich and the poor. This is the most beautiful manifestation of egalitarianism in the Holy Quran. And this was the constitution of our Holy Prophet. This is how he ran Medina. This is how he ran the first mosque. The poor, the rich, the black, the white, the brown, didn't matter. What mattered was La ilaha illallah Muhammadan Rasulullah. This is it. This is all that mattered. This is all that brought you inside. And then, of course, your commitment to the deen, obviously. Your commitment to those words. The manifestation of commitment to that testimony of faith. But other than that, there was none of this other baggage hanging on. And the people that would manifest these kinds of traits of racism, xenophobia, ignorance, dhulm, were outcasted, were ostracized from the Prophet's inner circle, or ostracized from society. Now, unfortunately, sometimes it's the other way around. And these are the values of the Prophet, which he implemented based on the revelation which came to him from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. فَلَا تَتَبِعُوا الْحَوَىٰ. So do not follow your desires, your animal instincts. أَن تَعْدِلُوا وَإِن تُلُّوا or تُعْرِضُوا. For if you fall prey, God is speaking to us, if we fall prey to these instincts of superiority and racism and xenophobia and club mentality or whatever it is, or class mentality, whatever it is. These are just a few examples. This is hawa. This is our sort of base animal instinct. If we do not rise above it, then God fears that we will swerve and not implement the justice that He has asked us to implement in this world. Right? This is not just for the Prophet and the Imams. This is for all of humanity. The Prophet and the Imams are the symbols and the light and the manifestation of what it means to be just. But we ourselves have to act upon these verses of the Holy Quran. And in order to do so, we first have to read the Quran, if we're not already doing so. And if we're not reading the Quran, then that's another compounded problem then. The problem becomes compounded and compounded and compounded. Because if someone was to come speak about justice from the Quran, if someone can't relate to that because they've not read the Quran or they don't read the Quran on a regular basis, then they have to start by looking at these issues in the Quran. And then moving on to deriving lessons from it. But nevertheless, this verse is also our constitution for living a modern life. What do I mean? That as human beings and the world, as we hover on the edge of self-destruction, as we hover on the edge of destroying our planet, as we hover on the fiscal cliff, as they say, isn't that in the current media, right? Fiscal cliff. What is the responsibility of Muslims as members of Western society? It's to be just. To be just is to ask for fair play. Fair play doesn't only mean issues with regards to family. It means being just with the environment, being just with money, with the distribution of wealth, how we treat prisoners, how we treat other minorities. Muslims have to rise above and see larger issues if they wish to have a productive existence in the West. That the justice that God is asking us to implement is not limited to our communities and our families. It extends to the outer society. I'll give you an example of what injustice would be. Injustice would be knowingly polluting. Because I'm not being just to Allah's creation. And unfortunately, our Muslim societies are the most polluted. I was at Masjid al-Kufa in Iraq, and all I could see was plastic bags from one end to the other. And garbage. Now, yes, it's a manifestation of larger economic issues and poverty and so on and so forth. But justice does not only mean reciting the khutbahs of Nahj al-Balagha and saying the prayers, reciting the du'as and doing the ziyarat and doing all of the pilgrimage. It means being just to everything that Allah has created in this universe. Being fair with everything. Not being excessive in our usage of water, not being excessive in our usage of electricity, in our usage of gasoline. This is how the Prophet used to live. For the Prophet, it was unjust to waste. It was unjust to pollute. And this is one way in which we can take these values of the Quran and extract from them very important modern and contemporary lessons. We have to move further as a Muslim community in Canada especially. Become members of the larger society. Be concerned with homelessness. Be concerned with poverty. Be concerned with unemployment. All of these are issues of justice. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And most importantly, be concerned with the events that are going on around us, the policies that are being formed by our own elected officials. This is all justice. We can recite all the khutbahs from Nahjul Balagha, go to attend the majalis. This is wonderful. This is a service. This is thawab in this. Everything. Yes, absolutely. But if that does not push me to be a better member of my society, a better member of my community, of my neighborhood, of my city, of my country, then what is it all for? If not to create a better, just, and peaceful world. In whatever little way I can. It doesn't have to be grand projects, feeding the homeless, giving out food, giving out jackets. Could be anything. This is the only way we can say we are the Shia of Ali ibn Abi Talib. That we are showing that we are living the values of the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt. So what made Amir al-Mu'mineen, Malik al-Ashtar, Kumail bin Ziyad, what made them so amazing and so special? Was their justice. Was their demand for fair play. First from themselves, from their family, from their community, and the society at large. But they first were a manifestation of what it meant to be fair. I'm going to give you a very powerful example from the life of Amir al-Mu'mineen, in which the Imam attempts to implement justice by putting people and things in the right places. Meaning if this cup doesn't belong here, just giving a very simple example. If this cup holder or this wooden piece is not designed for this cup, but I'm trying to jam the cup into it, when I take it and put it in its proper place, this is justice. This is the meaning of Islamic justice. Same thing goes for every aspect of our life. Not misusing our body, not misusing our creation, not misusing the environment, so on and so forth. And the same goes for running a government, appointing ministers. So 35 Hijri, the Imam becomes the Caliph of the Muslims. Uthman has been killed in Medina. The Imam is in Kufa, establishing the Khilafat in 35 after Hijrah. At this point, many important political decisions had to be made quickly, because we know the mess that the previous caliph had left things in. So, Ibn Abbas, the companion of Imam Ali and his political advisor, literally his political advisor, advises the Imam not to rock the boat for now, because there was a question as to what Imam Ali would do with the governors that Uthman had already appointed. Does he keep them in their positions? Maintain the peace at all costs? What does he do? So Ibn Abbas tells Amir al-Mu'mineen, لِأَنَّكَ تَعْلَمُ أَنَّ مُعَاوِيَ وَأَصْحَابِ أَهْلُ الدُّنْيَا. You know that Muawiyah and his companions are the people of this world, meaning you have given them their chai and their pani, their enjoyment, and they will not care who is in authority in Kufa. Perhaps. It doesn't mean Ibn Abbas is correct. This is what Ibn Abbas is saying. He says, لا يبالوا بمن ولا هذا الأمر. They won't care as to who's in authority. You let them do their enjoyment in Damascus. You rule in Kufa. We maintain peace. Sounds like a simple solution. وَإِن تَعَزَّلَهُمْ يَقُولُ أَخَذَ هَذَا أَمَرْ بِغَيْرِ الشُّورَى. If you remove them now from their positions, right? They were already appointed by Uthman, so you had to know, what do I do with these ministers, with these governors? If you remove them from their position, they'll begin to start accusing you of things They'll say, one, you became the caliph without consulting the shura, a group of Sahaba. One. Two, they will pin the death of Osman on you. Whether it's right or wrong, they will attempt to blame the death of Osman on you. Three, they will raise an army from Damascus against you, and they will raise the people of Iraq against you. Basically, they will create a sense of instability in your government. What do? Imams in our view, in sort of fallible way of looking at things, it's between a rock and a hard place. It's a difficult decision to make. Most politicians would say, okay, leave them for now. We'll deal with them later. We'll see what happens down the road. Because I'm not in a position militarily at this time to deal with them completely. Look at what our Imam says. This is why he is Amir al-Mu'mineen. This is why he's Haydar al-Qarar. Listen to his answer. He says, وَأَمَّا الَّذِي يَلْزَمَنِي. No, he says first, وَأَمَّا مَا ذَكَرْتَ مِنْ إِقْرَارِهِمْ فَوَاللَّهِ مَا أُشَكُّ عَنْ ذَلِكَ خَيْرٌ فِي عَاجِلِ الدُّنْيَا لِإِصْلَاحِهَا. He says that as for what you mentioned, as far as keeping them where they are for now, he said it makes sense. He says, by God, it makes sense. For keeping peace in this world, making sure there's no damal, there's no fights going on. Just go to sleep and worry about them tomorrow. It makes sense for the worldly kind of keeping the material peace. But then he says, وَأَمَّا الَّذِي يَلْزَمَنِي مِنَ الْحَقِّ. But as for the truth, it compels me and pushes me. وَالْمَعْرِفَةِ بِعَامَالِ الْعُثْمَانِ فَوَاللَّهِ لَا أُوَلُّ مِنْهُمْ أَحَدًا أَبَدًا. He says, but as for the truth, it compels me in such a way that my knowledge of who they are, of their corruptive behavior, that they are a zalim, that they don't belong in that position. Because of my knowledge of this, I shall never give them authority ever. Ibn Abbas didn't like it. He says, Ali, you're being idealistic. But for the Imam, if he dies tomorrow keeping them where they are, how will he answer Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Justice cannot wait till tomorrow. While I have the opportunity, I have to do it now. I cannot procrastinate on making the decision. And he says it very frankly. He says, look, if they accept it, it's khair. If in adbaru, badaltu lahum as-sayf. I will compel them with the sword. Because I am the caliph. And I will remove them from their position because they do not belong there. And we know they were drunkards and whatnot. It was not okay to wait until tomorrow to make the decision. It had to be done now. And this is a lesson of Amir al-Mu'mineen for us. We can't wait until tomorrow to do the right thing. We can't wait to have further meetings to discuss it, especially when the truth is right in front of our face. We have to act. Otherwise, we have fallen way below the expectations of our Imam. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And it's no wonder they say that the hand of God was the justice of Ali. Metaphorically speaking, of course. In fact, historians remark in their books when talking about his character, they say people just didn't understand him. It was hard for these Arabs to understand how important the haqq was. I mean, it's for this reason that he had so few followers. Because he didn't want to play the game of real politique. He didn't want to play the spin of politics. And the implications of that was that he had an unstable government. That is true. How many wars did he experience? In fact, some historians later on go so far to say that could we really, I'm not saying the Shia historians, I'm saying some non-Muslim historians say, could we really consider his khilafah to be khilafat at all? Because of the number of wars and instability that occurred in Kufa. But the Imam was not wondering as to whether we people will consider him to be a caliph or not. Are you with me here? He was not worried as to whether history will remember him as a caliph. He was worried whether history will remember him as being adil or zalim. And by consensus, history has remembered him as being adil. And that is what mattered to our Imam. Not in whether he was popular. Lord knows he wasn't. He wasn't. The decisions he made rubbed people the wrong way because they put things in the right place. And in politics, that's very difficult. And when you do it, you're going to make a lot of people unhappy with you. And the Imam was ready to face the consequences. To him, they were not consequences. To others, they were consequences. So the lesson from this story, and I'm not just here just to talk about history, what's the lesson from it? The lesson from it is that our Imam, the Quran, and our Imam, the Thaqalain, demands consistency from us at 3 levels. 1, there's a demand that we are consistent with the values that we hold. So if I live a life believing in the Quran, believing in the Sunnah of the Prophet, believing that Ali and Ala Ali were the successors to the Prophet, and I have a living Imam, then I am obliged to be consistent with those beliefs. That is, what I do cannot be out of step with what I believe. Cannot be. Otherwise, I fall into dhulm. I fall into nifaq. I fall into hypocrisy. So my beliefs on one hand and my actions on one hand should not be out of step with one another. 2, I must demand consistency from my co-religionists, from my fellow lovers of the Ahlul Bayt and Muslims at large. I have to demand consistency from them as well. That it's not okay to see dhulm occurring amongst friends, family, community members, and other Muslims at large. I have to demand consistency from my fellow Muslims. I can't live a life holed up in my home, worried only about myself. While I work on myself, I also try to work on the community. Because our effort on ourselves will be until we die. That is the truth. The excuse that I'm still trying to improve myself, so I don't want to partake in anything else, is a bit of a cop-out. I'll tell you why. Because we're supposed to work on ourselves until we're in the grave. That's a constant struggle. Now, yes, I have to make sure I'm not hypocritical. But while I work on myself, while I improve myself at home, I also contribute to my community and I also contribute to my society. It's not that or this. It's both. And thirdly, I demand consistency from my country and even non-Muslim society as a whole. That I'm not afraid to say that this policy is wrong. This economic policy is unjust. This environmental policy is unjust. Because the Shia of Amir al-Mu'mineen are not cowards. The Shia of Amir al-Mu'mineen are not interested in just staying in their homes. The haqq is the haqq wherever we see it. We have to be involved. If we are not involved, we have no one to blame but ourselves at the end of the day. Now, even if we don't achieve the goals that we set out for, God is only interested in us making the attempt. But if we don't make the attempt, then we only have ourselves to blame. And only then we will move forward as an ummah, as a Shia ummah and a Muslim ummah at large. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And I describe this, or rather, philosophers describe this as an ethics of independence. That in the face of emotions, potential anger, potential frowns and dislike, I will stand my ground on the Thaqalain. The Quran and the Ahlul Bayt will remain my constitution. That I'm ready to, so for lack of better words, face the music. But the Thaqalain, the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt will forever be my constitution. That I will not be a coward. Especially if I claim Hubb Ali. Especially if I claim the love of the Haydar. The love of Malik al-Ashtar, Salman, Muslim bin Usaja, Habib ibn Madahir. Even if we fear becoming social and communal pariahs, even if we fear becoming outcasts, our imams and the companions of our imams were ready to become outcasts. They were ready. Because they would not compromise on their ethics and morals, on the constitution of God and the Sunnah of the Prophet. So we should always ask ourselves, have we surrendered to God, or have we sort of partially surrendered to God? What level, to what degree is our tawheed, is our belief in God and the Ahlul Bayt authentic? We have to constantly measure this every day. To ask ourselves, my name is Ali, or my name is Hussein, or my name is Muhammad, or so on and so forth. To what extent do I represent this name in my life? And if I don't, why don't I? This is called muhasabah, riyadatu nafs. Self-examination. Right? And we're encouraged to do this every day, every single day. In fact, some people keep a diary. Some people keep a diary. That tends to be helpful for some. To keep a diary. Wake up and say, my name is Rida. How do I compare to my Imam Ali ibn Musa Rida? Doesn't matter how old or how young I am. And the moment we ask ourselves this question in the mirror, and we're able to deal with the answers that come in our mind, that's the moment where change begins. And this is what justice is. This is what self-justice is. And God is saying, first we have to ask ourselves these questions. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Is everyone with me? Clear? So far I'm talking about justice and its various meanings and its importance on our life. So I'm taking a historical example and trying to explain why it's important today. What relevance does it have to us today? Right? The practical implications of it. Okay, moving on. There's a beautiful discussion in Tuhf al-Uqul. It's actually translated in English. It's called The Masterpieces of the Intellect. It's a wonderful book by al-Sha'rani. It's translated into English. I don't know if you can find it online, but you could probably find it in one of the bookstores or order it. It's an amazing book. And in this book, there's a discussion between Imam al-Baqir and Jabir ibn Yazid al-Ju'fi, one of his beautiful sahabis. And in this conversation, the fifth Imam gives a series of advices to Jabir as to how to live in society, how to deal with disappointment, how to deal with fellow community members or fellow people in the city who may disagree with Jabir, or maybe against the Shia in general. How to deal with them. The Imam says the following. It's really important. These are very, very important practical points for living as a Shia of Ahl Bayt today. The Imam says, a day will come, Ya Jabir, in qulta lam yuqbil qawlik, wa lam yaqbal qawlik. That if you say something, your word will not be accepted. وَإِن خَطَبْتَ إن خَطَبْتَ لَمْ تُزَوِّجْ. That if you make a proposal in marriage, the marriage proposal of my Shia will be rejected, or it may be rejected. And I advise you of another series of things. So he's saying a day will come where people won't believe what you say. They won't accept your proposals in marriage. وَإِن كُذِبْتَ فَلَا تَخْدِبْ. And if you are accused of being a liar, don't get angry. وَإِن مُدِحْتَ فَلَا تَفْرَحْ. And if you're getting a pat on the back, if people are praising you, telling you, wow, mashallah, mashallah, you're amazing, you're great, you're amazing. La tafrah, the Imam says, don't become happy. Don't become happy. Meaning, it doesn't matter when people stroke our ego. What matters is how we stand in front of God. People can tell us, mashallah, until we are blue in the face. But I know who I am. I know if I deserve that or not. And the Imam is saying, don't become happy. Don't let it blow our head up. Because we better be straight with ourselves. Don't worry about whether other people like you or don't like you. Don't go run around seeking their approval. This is very, 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 very profound as to how he expects the Shia to live their life. He says, إِن ذُمِمْتَ فَلَا تَجْزَعْ. If you are rebuked, condemned, don't get overly upset. It's not the end of the world. فَفَكِّرْ فِيمَا قِيلَ فِيكَ. Think about what is said about you. وَإِنْ عَرَفْتَ مِنْ نَفْسِكَ مَا قِيلَ فِيكَ. If the accusations coming against you are true, that is, you recognize them as having validity. This is the punchline now, brothers. This is the punchline. So if these accusations against an individual, against me, for example, are true, that I may not admit them in public, but when I go home, I know that there's an element of truth in someone, God forbid, accusing me to be a liar or a sinner or whatever it may be. The Imam says, فَسَقُوتِكْ مِنْ عَيْنِ اللَّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ عِنْدَ غَضَبِكَ عند غضبك من الحق أعظم عليك مصيبة. He says that if you find what people say about you is true, the accusations, the greatest musibah of your life is if at that point in your life you feared more how you would fall in status in front of the people than how you have fallen from the eyes of God. If at that moment in our life, our real fear is what my wife will think of me, what my brother will think of me, what my father will think of me, what my community will think of me, then he says, هذا أعظم المصيبة. This is the greatest musibah of your life, the greatest tragedy. For you have fallen from the eyes of Allah, meaning from the care of God, from the respect of God. And you didn't care about it. That the first thing that came to my mind was, oh my God, what if this individual finds out? This is the greatest musibah, our Imam says. And there's no musibah greater than this for us in our life, than falling from the eyes of God. And not only that, for it not being our first concern, and our first concern is our brother, sister, wife, or son, or whoever it is. We don't seek validation from these relationships. Our validation comes from God. Now, yes, when someone tells you you've done something right, this is good, there's nothing wrong in that. But for us, the only way for us to evaluate ourselves is how we stand in front of God in the sunnah of the Ahlul Bayt. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For the Imam says, وَعْلَمْ بِأَنَّكَ لَا تَكُونُ لَنَا وَلِيًّا. For know that you shall not be a lover to us. You shall not consider yourself a wali of Ali and Ala Ali. حتى لو اجتمع عليك على أهل المسرك. This is very interesting, he tells Jabir. That you will not be one of our Shia until the people start coming against you. This is the people of your town, he's saying. What does he mean? Meaning that at the time of the Imams had many enemies. They had many people that were against the school of Ahlul Bayt. Society was ripe with corruption and materialism and so on and so forth. The Imam says that one of the signs that you are with us is when the sinners have a dislike towards you. That if you find yourself too buddy-buddy with those who live immoral lives, then we cannot be considered the lovers of Ahlul Bayt. There's a problem somewhere in the system. Then the Imam says, وَقَالُوا. Even if someone tells you, even if they say to you that you're a bad person, he comes to this issue again. He says, or even if they say that you're a good person, وَلَكِنْ أَعْرِضْ نَفْسِكَ عَلَى كِتَابِ اللَّهِ. Don't worry about this, but put yourself up against the book of God. وَإِن كُنْتَ سَالِكًا سَبِيلِهِ وَزَاهِدًا فِي تَزْهِيدِهِ وَرَاغِبًا فِي تَرْغِيبِهِ. He goes on and on. Basically, if you put yourself up against the book of God and you are following in the way that God has asked you to, and that of course includes following the Imam, أَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَرَسُولُهُ وَأُولِي الْأَمْرِ مِنْكُمْ, following those that are in authority. If my life matches up to the Quran as my constitution and the Sunnah of Ahlul Bayt as my constitution, then he says, nothing will hurt you in this world. There will be nothing that will injure your heart. That you have to grow a thick skin. That if at the end of the day you could say I was just with myself, with my family and with others, then at the end of the day the Imam says, nothing will ever hurt you. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Once again, we each have to ask ourselves, to what extent is the Quran our constitution? To what extent is the Sunnah of the Prophet our constitution? To what extent am I adversely affected by what people say about me, even if I'm doing the right thing? And if so, why am I adversely affected? Why do I constantly seek, if this is the case, validation from others? Why don't I first and foremost seek validation from the Book of God and the Sunnah of the Ahlul Bayt? This is what the Imam is asking us. This is what he's telling Jabir, you will not be one of us. You will not be our wali until this becomes a part of your life. Till this is the way that you live your life. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And of course, all of this comes down to us falling prey to our passions. And I talked about this on the Thursday night for those who are here. So I'm not going to go over that topic again, right? But it comes down to us learning to control ourselves, learning to control our desires. And it's not easy. I know it's not easy. But the more and more we try, the better we will be at it. The more and more we try to control our eyes and our ears from listening to what is not appropriate or none of our business, or our eyes from where they don't belong, the better we will be at training ourselves. The better we will be at being just most of the time of our life. But what God is asking for us is to make an attempt. God is not asking us to become perfect, nor is God expecting us to become perfect. God is asking us to try, to sincerely try, to not be lazy, to not be lethargic, to not be complacent, but to make an attempt to change our lives. And when we don't, God says, we have not committed dhulm against anyone in reality, but we have committed dhulm against ourselves. That our biggest enemy is ourself. For example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالَّذِينَ إِذَا فَعَلُوا فَاحِشَةً وَظَلَمُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ. That those, when they commit an evil act, God forbid, like adultery or premarital relations or other kinds of things, وَظَلَمُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ. They have hurt themselves, they have oppressed themselves. That if we look at sin as an act of self-dhulm, as self-oppression, then it changes our perspective completely on what injustice is. Injustice doesn't only mean being rude to someone, stealing from someone, not paying my taxes on time. No, it means being unfair with myself, not waking up for my salat intentionally. That is injustice. That is a huge injustice. If we begin to view justice and injustice in this perspective, we will realize the significance of what it means to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in that sense, we could consider ourselves, when we commit a sin, to become a zalim. A zalim. And usually we use these terms for people like Saddam and Yazid. And yes, that's a completely different level. But that doesn't mean that we cannot become a zalim ourselves. When I choose not to wake up for salat, when I choose to ignore a sunnah, something that has been made wajib, or ignore staying away from something which has been made haram for me. When I do that, I become a zalim. I become a tyrant. But I become a tyrant to myself. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I'll just end with a few words regarding the experience of Al Hussein as they approach Sham. We know the journey from Kufa was long, was a very long journey. Our beloved Imam Zain al-Abidin had his neck and hands shackled. The historians relate, even the historians of our Sunni brothers and sisters relate, that he began to bleed from his neck. That it was digging into the neck of our Imam. And often the historians would relate that they would see blood all around the collar. He almost had a collar like a dog had. That's how it's described, as a dog collar. I'm not over exaggerating. It's disgusting. That is how they treated our Imam. He had a collar around his neck, a metal collar, which was tied to each of his wrists. And our Imam was forced to walk. He was forced to walk from Kufa to Sham. Can you imagine? Not only walking, but walking and collared like an animal. the son of Hussein. Allahu Akbar, Ya Zadar Hussein. It is stated, راكبين أقطابا يأبس ورأس الحسين على العلم. And as they walked, the head of Hussein was impaled on a spear or a flagpole of some sort. The women were thrown upon saddleless camels. Can you imagine? The women were thrown upon camels without any saddles. Not for a short journey, my brothers and sisters, from Kufa to Sham. Can you imagine the kind of trauma that they went through? Without a saddle. And why, brothers and sisters? Because in Arabia, that was a sign of disgust. That was a sign to show someone that you are even below a human being. Because a human right in that society was to have a saddle, like having a seatbelt. But Ahlul Bayt were even denied these basic rights. And the reason Yazid and the leader of the army ordered this was to dehumanize the daughters of the Prophet. They were not only prisoners, they were dehumanized, at least in the eyes of Ibn Ziyad. They were surrounded by infantrymen holding spears. It is related, إن دمعت عين أحدهم قرع رأس برمح, that if one of them dared to cry, the punishment was the head of their father began to be hit with a stick. If our beloved Sakina would cry, her father's face would be hit with a stick. This is the kind of sickness, Allahu Akbar, Ya Zadar Hussein. This is the kind of depravity that the daughters of the Prophet were exposed to. It is stated that they were taken from place to place just as slaves would be ferried around. كما تساق أسار الترك والديلم. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. Ya Zadar Hussein. It is reported that Zainab al-Kubra once said, قد علم الله ما صار إلينا. She says, God knows what happened to us. Meaning that our musibah is so great that no matter what we try to encapsulate of it, God knows truly what happened to us. God knows truly what happened to us on that road from Kufa to Sham, from Karbala to Kufa. God knows. It's in the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Which is whatever I tell you here, it's just a drop in the bucket of what the reality was. She says, Qutila khayruna. The best of us amongst us were killed. And then she says, Ya Allah, wa ansaqna kamma tusaqu al-an'am. She says herself that we were ferried around like livestock. Allahu Akbar. She says we were treated like animals. Ibn Tawus relates, as they approached the outskirts of Damascus, Lady Kulthum posed a request for Shimr Mal'un. Imagine, this is how desperate the situation was, that our Lady Kulthum was forced to ask a hajat from Shimr, the man that ripped the head from her brother's shoulders. She was forced to ask him a hajat. She said, Li ilayka haja, I have a need from you. Shimr says, what is it? She asked Shimr, when you bring the heads into the city, when you bring us into the city, do so from a gate which has few spectators. And place the heads at the front, because we do not want, as people come to look at the heads, we do not want them to begin to look at us. Remember, our ladies were without hijab. The ladies of Ahlul Bayt were not covered. They were fearing the moment that they would enter Sham. This was enough humiliation for them. Kulthum could not take it anymore. And she asked Shimr that the least you could do is to put the heads at the front of the caravan. And Shimr, as sick as he is, put them even closer to the women. As sick as he was, he intentionally placed the heads in the middle of the caravan so they could enjoy staring at them as they gazed at the hair and the bodies of the daughters of the prophets. وَلَعْنَ اللَّهُ عَلَىٰ أَعْدَائِهِمْ أَجْمَعِينَ من الآن إلى يوم الدين ماتم حسين.